So here's how it starts for me is the one thing I don't want to die. The one way I don't want to die. There's two. I don't want to drown, obviously, but I don't want to die in my sleep. I know that everybody says they want to die in their sleep.
I would hate to die in my sleep. I mean, I already act like every night I'm about to die.
Why?
Because I can't fall asleep to silence. That's the worst ending to my life in my mind. I have to fall asleep to that's why it takes so long looking for something to watch. I can find something stupid to watch during the day.
Yeah.
But if I'm about to go to bed, it has to be good. Like not like super entertaining, just like something that's not like stupid or too scary. Like something I can just fall asleep to. A lot of times I would fall asleep to War of the Worlds.
And the original broadcast?
No, I wish. The Tom Cruise movie.
The Tom Cruise movie was your big go home. Not like if I die in my sleep, the last thing I ever watched was Tom Cruise's War of the Worlds. It was
half soothing because I'm dying along with everyone on screen. So I'm not alone. But also I can see oh yeah, I'm an action hero and I'm running out of here. But also it's a soothing movie because it's all dark and shit. It's all this. The setting is really dark, and it's not like I want to die watching that movie. It's I would be okay if I had to die right now, falling asleep to this movie.
One of my friends said that his perfect death would be with some sort of apocalypse. He said it was my old roommate Jamie from Connecticut, and Jamie was like, I want to be there. I want to die with everybody. I want this to be the end of the world because then I'll know I saw the end of it. I want
FOMO. Some major FOMO?
No, almost the opposite.
Oh,
but
really?
It was the idea. He was like, if I'm going to die, I want to see the end of everything. I want it to be the apocalypse or the tidal wave or the earthquake or the alien invasion, this thing that...
I can see that.
Because then you would know you were like, okay, well, I made it to the end. Kind of like we didn't get canceled, Meltdown closed.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't... you know what I mean? It all died. It all died.
We weren't... Die.
The whole thing died.
Going. We went to a different planet.
We did. We went to an alternate universe.
It's like our country sank into the ocean and we went to a different island. We went to America. Comedy Store America.
I do find it interesting because we have a preoccupation. This is the way I kind of cognize things. Every human being, and I'm almost certain, but I think it's a survival, evolutionary, instinctual thing that we all think the worst thing in the world is going to happen during our time. As a survival instinct, we all have to believe that the end of times is near, so that because that it's the anxiety of the fear of the unknown and death anyway. Mm-hmm. So the brain goes to survival mode. So it heightens it to, I think I'm going to see the last thing or the worst thing. That's why we're always afraid that nuclear war is going to break out, because what your body and your mind does is it defends from impending doom. And we know that we're the subject to nature at all times. So we think something terrible is going to happen because we have to be anxious enough to ward off whatever that attack is. Mm-hmm. But in actuality, if you think about this, 99% of every human being, of all human beings who've ever lived, have lived and died a normal ass life. Most human, and I don't mean most as in the majority, 60%, 99% of all humans who've ever lived have lived just a regular life. But we've all been terrified that the war is going to break out, or the plague is going to happen, or the earthquake is going to swallow us up. Most people don't see some catastrophic event. There are a few in history that do occur. For instance, the Civil War was kind of one of those catastrophic wars that we were all fearful of. That's a moment in history. The Civil War is kind of an end of times moment, especially for America. I think it's interesting. It's I don't want to say the deadliest war in history, but it is. It was for America. It was the deadliest war in history. Do you know how many people died in the Civil War?
Is it 600,000?
It's 600 to 800,000, which is literally more than the American Revolution, World War I, World War II, and Vietnam.
As far as Americans
are concerned.
Wow.
So if you took all the American casualties, that's why I say that the Civil War is the top, it's got to be in the top 3 wars of all time.
Yeah. As far as Family Feuds go, definitely the most
Well,
violent.
What do you think? And I would say we put it in an American spin because the truth is we're American. We're coming from America. We're coming from the point of view. If you looked at the world on a whole, it's a much different conversation, right? Just like we know that in Russia views that they're the ones who won World War II. And America is like, well, we won World War II, right? So it's one of those weird standoffs. So as far as American wars go, greatest wars of all time, where do you rank the Civil War?
As far as America goes.
Yeah.
What do you mean by greatest war?
I mean, like, best war. Like, because it's not, there's no such thing as a great war or a best war, but like, you know what I mean? If we were talking about these wars, like they were like basketball players or singers, and you were just like, what's your Mount Rushmore of wars? Or what's the greatest war of all time?
As far as movies, like if you were to make every war a movie, like as far as like close calls, villains, heroes, all of that, the story, I would put Civil War third, right?
Behind which ones?
World War II is number one for me.
World War II is the war.
It's honestly
it's the war.
The most were at stake, the most were lost in my mind.
Clearly a good guy and a bad guy-ish, but that's fucked because Stalin technically fought for the good guys.
Every story is different too. Every war is like different because second I would put Revolutionary War.
Do you know how many Russians were lost in World War II?
No idea.
27 million.
27 million?
I mean, look it up to make sure I'm right, but that's what I hear. Like, Russia lost 27 million people during World War II.
Oh, that was the first thing that comes up after Russian deaths. 70 to 85 million. Right?
Wow. Just in World War II alone?
World War II fatality statistics vary with estimates of total death range from 70 to 85 million. It's directly caused with the war. Military, civilians killed, estimated are 50 to 56
That's almost
million.
as much as the bubonic plague. That's more than the Jews. Think about how fucked that is. And I'm saying this mostly for the podcast, but I'm Jewish. My grandmother was in the Holocaust. We lost a lot of Jews. We lost a lot of terror. And if you think about, we not just lost 6 million Jews. The Nazis exterminated 11 million people in those death camps. We just used the number 6 million Jews because it's the most obvious thing. But there's a lot of people who are persecuted then. So we both agree. If you're going to list, especially for America, when you say what are the top wars, what are the greatest wars, like World War II is number one. So I think the number 2 spot is either going to the American Revolution or the Civil War, based on the idea that their importance within us.
Mm-hmm. We learned every war and battle we learned about in school was kind of we got to watch a movie about it.
Did you watch that? This is the one I remember the most from middle school. Our teacher had to be out for like 2 weeks or something like that because he had a son who had some sort of developmental issue because of something that happened at birth. And like, it was a big issue and they had to go to court several times, like throughout his life, just to re-up on whatever the issue was, like, because they want a malpractice. Anyway,
wow.
Teacher was out for like a week or two. And so a sub came in and showed us this movie called Andersonville.
I have a question.
Oh, I was hoping you knew Andersonville.
I don't know Andersonville, but I do have a question about the teacher. Did you know about it before you had him as a teacher? Like that he would have to miss a lot of classes?
No.
I was going to say, were there kids that were like, I hope I get that teacher with that son?
Oh, no.
So we'll get that substitute who shows us weird
His name
movies.
wasn't Mr. McBride. I don't remember what it was. Mr. McBride was the substitute teacher, but not the one that we had. A different one.
So it's a movie. So sorry, it was a movie called.
Look up on YouTube. We'll play the trailer. It's called Andersonville. It was like a TNT movie. Like Warner Brothers put it on TNT. They may have released it, but I think it was a made-for-TV movie. It's this 2-hour epic, and we watched it while the teacher was out. It's on YouTube. Oh yeah, no, I know. I watched the trailer.
It's 2 hours and 47 minutes. And only
it was a TV event.
They and only 1,700 views.
How long has it been up?
Well, 2 months, so that makes sense.
Okay, it's a long movie too.
Yeah, people who started watching it 2 months ago are still watching it. Movie trailer. Should I play it?
Play the movie trailer. You'll never guess who's in it. Biff is in it.
Yeah, Turner Pictures, Warner Brothers.
From acclaimed director John Frankenheimer.
You know, I know John.
They were prisoners trapped in a living hell. What do you call this little piece of heaven? It's Anderson. They're struggling for survival. You don't drink from that swamp. What do you do when it don't rain? You do it out. Don't trust him, he's a rat! Shoot you for fun?
With the production value of Monty Python.
They'll do anything they can to get out of this place.
Andersonville.
Escape. You want to get out of here? Then we got a tunnel. You got any tools? Knives, swords, spoons. It's to put their trust in each other. What happens when we get outside? We're not all gonna make it.
With the music from a student trailer.
Yeah, what is this? This music is not... This is like a Michael Bay soundtrack.
And the acting of a porn video.
And Biff.
Oh, cool. Everyone just got hung at the same time.
Yeah.
Hanged it?
And you have no idea what this movie is about based on this trailer.
Yeah. Andersonville. You will never escape its memory. And it never escaped yours.
A trailer like that. So that was it was a movie about a Confederate prison camp in the Civil War. And it was I don't really remember much about it. It was the living conditions were horrible. Because I mean, look, the biggest I always say look like that.
Well, it started out as a movie about dysentery. And then don't drink the water.
This is the thing about the Civil War to me that stands out the most is that it was not only it started this new modern trench warfare not trench warfare, but this new kind of warfare of just front lines killing with guns that were sophisticated but caused a lot of injury and a lot of damage and a lot of sickness. The conditions were horrible for troops. People were getting sick left and right. All the amputations because medicine was advancing but not fast enough.
Right.
It was this horrible just wreck of a time where everyone was dying and sick and ailing. And Andersonville is this prison camp where they were basically living in a mud pit with a wall around it. They tried to tunnel out. I remember very vividly one scene, one of the prisoners gets some salt pork and he's eating salt pork. And I was like, that does look delicious.
It was a lot of marching and then a lot of jumping into crowds of people. And then a lot of staring at the trailer I just saw, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot of soldiers staring at each other.
Yeah. Biff is
tension. Biff's in it?
Tom Wilson.
Who does he play?
A Union soldier.
Union soldier.
Who's in the camp.
John Frankenheimer, if you're listening to this, God bless you.
So we watched this whole movie in the class while the substitute teacher's there. Riveting stuff.
I
enjoyed it.
Throughout the 2 weeks.
I don't think we finished it. If we did, I don't remember it.
If you had 40-minute classes per day, it would take a full week.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Finish.
I just don't know if we finished or not. I never went back and rewatched it. Although I always think about it every once in a while. I'm like, I should watch Andersonville.
Do you think you're the only one that thinks that?
Probably. I don't think John Frankenheimer thinks. I don't think was that his name?
He did the Manchurian Candidate.
Which one? The first one or the remake?
62, the original.
Wow.
7 Days in May, Birdman of Alcatraz. You know, the classics.
This is how I think of American history. The American Revolution and the Declaration of Independence. Abe Lincoln and the Civil War. World War II. Lincoln gets shot. Right after that.
What is this?
This is like, as a kid, this was how I thought of American history. Like, this is how I sorted it out. These were I know American history.
Not in the order, right?
These are in order.
Wait, did you just say World War II and then Lincoln gets shot?
I meant Kennedy.
Okay.
Did I say Lincoln? I meant Kennedy.
I feel like...
As a kid, this was how I viewed American history. I was like, there's nothing else. I got it. American Revolution, Declaration of Independence. We start.
Right.
Then...
That's the opening of the country.
Then, Abe Lincoln in the Civil War. We free the slaves. He gets shot. Then we go to World War II and that whole mess. Then... Kennedy gets shot.
Immediately.
Right after Kennedy, we go to the moon, but it's really not important in the history of anything.
Yeah.
And then if I were a kid today, I'd be like, and then 9/11. Like that is, to me, is the
9/11.
kid version of the history of the United States.
I was pretty young during 9/11, so I think that's when I started researching. Like,
How old were you?
just turned 11.
And what grade is that?
Fifth grade. My brother was in third grade, and our dad traveled a lot. So my mom called the school. I didn't know anything about what was going on. It was kind of like rumors until our teachers. I don't even think our teachers really told us. They just said like something about. They were vague. They were like, "There's an attack." They never had to, study this in teacher school. They were like, "If there's a terrorist attack, be vague."
Wait,
keep it light.
Can you imagine
compare it to past events?
Can you imagine if there was a class where some teacher was teaching teachers? They were like, "Okay, look, scenario number 82." A plane flies into the World Trade Center, and the teachers are like, "Why do we need to learn this?"
The teachers, the teachers always skip that. The teacher students always skip that class. They're
We'll never need to know it.
Yeah.
But it's just a teacher. It's a class for teachers on all of the crazy things that you can encounter. It's the first class is like, what happens when a kid poops his pants?
Yeah.
Class 82 is 9/11.
There's really nothing, and even because the last thing a teacher in America would have had to be like, okay, let me break this to the students, even though they can't really comprehend this, was probably Kennedy, getting shot. That was probably the first, because that was a U.S. president. Whenever there's a celebrity who dies, I don't think my teachers ever told us. It was always like rumors.
Kennedy getting shot is important. I think
the teachers
most
probably had to tell that. But even then, if I was a student and the teacher's like, the president got shot in 5th grade, I'd be like, we have a president? I thought we had a king. I wouldn't know that.
You did come from Tennessee. You were one of the Confederates for a while.
We didn't know. Yeah, okay.
You were a Confederate.
So here's the thing about growing up in a school in Tennessee near a Civil War battle, like a famous Civil War battle, Franklin, Tennessee. This is what they did for field trips. Every grade. Every single grade. Super, super easy to do. Super cheap. The principal's like, I don't know, take them, walk them around the school, make them pack a lunch. It's good. Make them eat in the cemetery. I don't care. So we just walked her. This is where a battle was.
Was there like a dedicated battlefield near you? Like
there were
historic?
There were several. There was one.
Did you go
particular.
To those?
I went to those definitely in elementary school.
So teach me what those battles were. Like, tell me what you remember about those field trips. Like, which ones were you near? Do you remember the one you were near the most?
Well, the Battle of Franklin was like, I lived in Franklin, Tennessee. There was a Battle of Franklin. Honestly, I remember nothing from those field trips. I remember going on them, and every time we walked, whenever we went to a house, it would just be my friends telling me like the ghost stories about the house. There were ghost stories all over that town. I went back to Franklin. I saw a little thing that's like, get a tour of Franklin. And there was like a bunch of things listed. It was like, look at the battlefield and look at the houses and stuff. The first thing they list though is ghosts. Like, very religious town, ghosts. First on the tour. Just, you want to see some ghosts? Oh yeah, there's history.
Have you seen a ghost in Tennessee?
The kids in the town probably saw a couple ghosts a few times. And I've heard stories about people seeing
have you seen a ghost? That was a weird non-answer.
I don't remember. And if I did, I blocked it from my memory. I remember stories that, I remember moments from, when I was a kid where I was like, that could have been a ghost. At the same time, I was pretty stupid growing up. My brother and I would find a Coca-Cola bottle cap, and we're like, "Oh, it's probably from the Civil War." But we'd find it our backyard or something. It's like, obviously this isn't from the Civil War. We didn't dig 20 feet into the ground. We dug less than 3 inches in on accident.
It's a penny that says 1964 on it, and you're like, maybe it's from the Civil War.
Lincoln's on it.
You thought wheat pennies were from the Civil War, didn't you?
So we heard all these stories. There was one. So there's one part in Tennessee, and honestly, every time I've driven past it, I think it's the trees. But whenever we drive past it, it's super dark around the house. So many fucking people died in that house during the Civil War.
Wait,
not just soldiers. Soldiers.
How close were you to the house? Like, how close do you live to it?
I didn't live that close. I lived probably 2 miles from it, but whenever I drive...
That's really close.
I mean, a ghost isn't going to walk 2 miles to kill me. There's plenty of people around.
He's like...
There's a McDonald's down the street. They have plenty of bait.
Why would I walk there?
Not
worth it.
Ghost isn't going to... Even if they can float, they're going to float the whole way. Have you taken a bird? Have you done an electric scooter? They're like an electric scooter speed to my house. That would take forever. They're going to get bored. They're going to stop at the church or something.
2 miles is not that far, but I get it.
For a ghost floating? Probably. I remember whenever I drove past it, it was just really dark and creepy. But like a child.
Did you ever go into it?
I just drive past. I wouldn't even park near it.
Do people live in the house, or is it an abandoned house?
I think it's like a small company there or something like that. I'm sure they have like creepy experiences all the time because I felt creeped out people feel creeped out when they drive past it. I've been told this like, oh yeah, this house, yeah, I've driven past there, it's creepy. But like a kid like hung herself there. Soldiers died there when they were trying to fix them up.
Are a lot of the houses there from Civil War era?
In downtown Franklin.
Wow.
In the main part of the city. The city that's
Does it still feel old, or did they remodel it?
Yeah, there's a Confederate statue in the middle of the city when you drive around. There's like a little circle.
But like, when is that from? What I mean is, does it feel like the town was built in the 1800s, or did they modernize everything?
They kept everything pretty much the same. It was actually made in 1799.
No way.
And
like, are there cobblestone streets from that? That's what I'm picturing, like red brick cobblestone pathways in the middle of town.
I'll show you pictures right now. Probably. Let's see if I can show you pictures.
I would love if your town isn't even Googleable. If they're just like Franklin, Tennessee, come on, dude.
It's just the word Franklin, Tennessee, and all the images in Google.
I don't know that place. I don't. I'm Google, but I don't even know Franklin.
So this is the feel of it.
By the way, everyone who's listening to this from Franklin,
let me describe
right now.
It looks like. Have you seen the movie Elizabethtown?
Yeah,
it looks like.
I don't remember that.
It looks like
it's cute. Yeah, but it doesn't.
It's cute, yeah.
But I guess some of those things
it's almost like 1900.
Okay,
most of the buildings look like they're
it looks
from the
kind of
early
like
1900s.
Main Street, USC, and Disneyland.
That's what I told. That's what I was talking about when I was like, this feels like Franklin, Tennessee, because that's what Walt was trying to do, right? He's trying to keep a small town.
So how far from where you lived was the Franklin battlefield?
The same distance as the ghost, yeah. Because that was.
So what happened at the Battle of Franklin?
The Battle of Franklin.
Fucking Google that shit now.
I'm on
if
it.
You don't know.
I'm on Wikipedia.
Hold on. You're telling this shows you what kind of student you were in school. You're like, yeah, we took field trips to battlefields all the time. Yeah, what happened there?
I don't remember. I barely remember what I learned on the Oregon Trail game, and that was fun.
I grew up in Stamford, Connecticut. There's no Civil War battlefields near me, but what there was a nature center that we went to all the time. And one time we went to Sturbridge Village, which was like a colonial reenactment village where you would go and watch somebody like bang steel and blow glass, and you'd be like, oh shit, we used to have to do that stuff. Well, I just buy it at the store now, thanks. Like, must have been real tough to have to make your own nails. This was the thing, because I actually went there. I went there before I moved out here.
Yeah.
I went back to Sturbridge Village to see this little colonial thing, because it's like a living museum.
Yeah.
Right? They're reenacting all these little things. I was like, I want to go. And most every place you went, they talked about how every person in town had a skill and they would just trade. And they used the same example. They were like, I need nails to make chairs, so I would trade for the nails, and then I'd make the chairs and trade those. I think it was always the nails and the chairs.
So simpler back then. Didn't have to worry about money and taxes. Well, taxes we have to worry about. So I looked it up, and I was right. It's the war of a lot of people dying.
How many people died?
Casualties and losses, 2,326 total. Now, I don't know what the population of Franklin was, but I don't think it was 2,300.
What is it now? Out of curiosity, what's the population of Franklin, Tennessee?
750,000. It was 250 when I moved there in the 90s.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, when you moved there, 1/10 of the population. That's how many people died in the battle.
Which is
1/10 of the population in 1990.
Wait, what do you mean 1/10?
Well, you said you moved there in 1990?
Yeah.
So in comparison's sake, that losing 2,500 people at the Battle of Franklin would have been like you showing up in town and 1/10 of the population, one out of every 10 people just dropping dead when you got there. I'm just trying to contextualize it somehow because you said you didn't know what the population was back then.
Oh, let me look it up. Franklin, Tennessee.
In what, 1860? Can you name the years of the Civil War without looking it up right now?
If I were to guess, I remember it's 1850s.
When was Lincoln shot?
1863? Is that right? Tell me that's right.
I'm not going to say anything. I want to hear.
It's either 63 or 68. Maybe I'm picturing it, and maybe like the 8 is like half invisible, and that's why I'm like not seeing the whole vision. I'm a very visual learner. I would say 18 because it was like was it before he was president too, or was it like? God, I don't know nothing about the thing that surrounded my entire life for the majority of my entire life.
Yeah. Keep going. You're almost there-ish.
To 1864. I'm going to say 1864. No, I'm going to say 18... shit. I'm going to say 1864. No. Yes. 1864. Final offer.
So that's the year Lincoln died.
That's the... no, I think he died in 63. I think 64 is the year it ended. The Civil War ended. Didn't it end a year after he died? Technically? Or was it like a week after? Am I mixing up? What is time? I argue, what is time, Eddie? I think none of this matters. It's in the past now, but we should always remember the past.
Okay, so
you've been listening to.
I'm going to get as close as I can to this. Abe Lincoln was shot on... He was shot on April 14th, 1865, and died the next day, April 15th, 1865. I believe that's how it happened. I believe the date's April 15th, and I believe a week later, the Civil War ended.
Probably right. It is a week later. What day did you say he died?
April 15th, 1865.
You got it right. And now, what is Abe Lincoln's middle name?
Edward.
It doesn't list it here.
So I gave him mine.
I don't think he has it. I don't think he has a middle name, to be honest.
And so the Civil War, his death and the Civil War ending were a week apart. And I believe the Civil War ended after. I should know it, but look that up. The Civil War was from 1861 to 1865.
April 9th, 1865. Remember we asked... this was one of the questions...
Yeah, on that first video.
That fucking first video.
God, right now, play the audio from that video.
On the podcast?
On the podcast.
Edit here. I forget about it. Abraham Lincoln died...
A week after.
Right.
Damn it, I got those mixed up. So
it's easy to do. He
ended it, and then he got shot. And John Wilkes Booth shot him because he thought he was going to be celebrated. Half of the country did not believe in what was being done in that instance. As right or wrong as history proves them, at that time, they did not agree with what he was saying and doing.
You know what? I would rather be Lincoln than FDR. Because at least Lincoln got to see it end. Mm-hmm. But John Wilkes Booth...
I would always have rather have been Lincoln.
Yeah, he didn't have... I mean, his life was pretty depressing.
Who's Lincoln's?
Lincoln's. Didn't, like, everybody around him die?
I guess we are looking at it a little bit retrospectively.
Everyone was depressed around him.
Although, would you want to... I guess the question is, would you have wanted to had to lead the country through the Civil War or World War II? Civil War is a lot harder, but that's what makes him... I think that's what tends to make people say he's the greatest president. That is literally an internal struggle tearing the nation apart, and he somehow made it work.
I think if you look at it, I'd rather be FDR because Lincoln's doing a lot of stage time, but then FDR just has to do like a podcast.
You'd rather do the radio
Fireside chats sound a lot chiller.
Have you ever listened to one? I've never listened to one.
No, I'm sure it's boring as shit, but
a lot of ums and ahs. Maya.
Yeah, what's easier to listen to, that or having to have like a thesaurus with you whenever Lincoln's doing a speech?
I don't know, man. There's an eloquence to the way he wrote.
Yeah, it was poetic.
Was he writing that stuff, or did he have speechwriters?
I don't know. Let's look it up.
Study guide should actually be called Google that.
Okay, so you're never going to guess who his speechwriter was.
Oh!
Jon Favreau from Pod Save America. That guy is good. Lincoln was a superb writer, like Jefferson and Teddy Roosevelt, but few, I'm doing great, but few, if any, other presidents, he could have been a successful writer. Wholly apart, who wrote this? Wholly apart from his political career, he needed no White House speechwriter, as that post is understood today. This was in the Smithsonian.
You turned into Arnold. There's eloquence in those words. Sit down and write in his voice one day. Like, it's a very interesting exercise. I had to do it one time for a project, and like reading the way he would write it, and then listening to somebody like Obama speak, you get into this great rhythm. It's a very pretty. He's very eloquent. Something I think that's important. We'll get to that.
That's interesting though. Lincoln, Jefferson, and Teddy Roosevelt wrote their own speeches. From what I'm reading, from whatever this guy said, it seems like that.
At what point did reading a teleprompter become a very necessary skill for being a president? Do they give him classes before or after becoming president to read teleprompters? You got to actually be able to do that.
It's whenever we got the TV, I bet they either had started off with cue cards and then went to teleprompters. Definitely during Bill Clinton. I
think he had some cue cards. I think George W. Bush or George H. Bush did.
I bet George W. Bush.
I think George W. Bush looked down in some speeches early on, and then they started getting it. Or I might be mistaken there. I wonder if Lincoln memorized his speeches, or if he read.
He would take them out of his hat, right?
Oh yeah, there you go. He kept the speeches in his hat, of course. Fuck.
I'm doing great. I just Googled teleprompter for some reason. I know what it is. I meant to type first president to need a teleprompter.
The Civil War is fought between the North, the Union, and the South, the Confederacy. And though there's a lot of other factors that go into it, essentially it comes down to slavery. The North wants to abolish slavery, and the South wants to keep it for economic and obvious power reasons. And Lincoln is very famous for saying if he could keep the Union together and keep slavery, he would do it. And if to keep the Union together, he has to end slavery, he'll do it. His only concern was keeping America together and not letting it fracture into two separate states and two separate countries. That's all he cared about.
It was a close one.
And then he realized that was the only way to do it was to end it. But there's a really weird twist about how it was like and he got backed into it because he made it a federal law, but he couldn't make it a state law. So what do you have? What'd you find?
Guess what president
was the
first one to use a teleprompter? I'll give you 3 guesses.
The very first one?
The very first president to use a teleprompter.
Or when it became a regular thing. Because I think
for the State of the Union address is what it says.
Then probably Jimmy Carter, like even earlier than that, maybe. Johnson, Ford came before Jimmy Carter.
It was before. I'll tell you this. It was before Jimmy Carter. I'll give you 2 more guesses.
JFK, the movie star.
Before JFK.
There was no Lincoln. There was not. Again, I told you as a kid in my head there was Lincoln and then there was Kennedy. There was
Dwight D. Eisenhower was the first. Well, it was the first president to use it during the State of the Union.
Ryan,
I guess it's the I Love Lucy guy.
There were 4 presidents: Washington,
right.
Lincoln, FDR, Kennedy.
So Thomas Jefferson was not.
No, he
didn't make it.
Doesn't make
he
it.
just wrote the fucking Declaration of Independence.
That's your new Mount Rushmore.
Right.
If the first one is arbitrary, then the new one is what I just said. There's your new Mount Rushmore. George Washington, yeah. Abe Lincoln, FDR, Kennedy. There's your new.
So you lived, how many presidents?
You have to put Obama.
You lived through 4 presidents.
Okay, so there's now a 5th head on Mount Rushmore.
We got a full hand.
What would it take for us to make the new Mount Rushmore?
What would it take for us to sell finger puppets of the new Rushmore?
Look, I think historical roast should take up a cause. We're taking up a cause. This is they need to make Mount Rushmore 2. Because don't get rid of the original. Well, you don't need to get rid of the original.
Classic.
Keep it exactly. We'll still visit it.
Uh-huh.
As much as we've ever visited Mount Rushmore. Have you been to Mount Rushmore?
No.
Neither have I.
I just went to Washington D.C. for the first time.
Really? What'd you think?
It was cool to see the statue of Lincoln from that museum too. It was nice to see. It was okay to see the White House. Honestly, it felt like I was seeing an ex-girlfriend, and I know she's dating like a douchebag at the time. So it's like, oh, hey, how's it going? Like, I've seen you.
First time you ever saw it.
Yeah, I've never seen the White House before in person, and I have to say, not that big.
No,
I expected like a bigger.
You think it's? Did you see the Capitol? You expected it to be the size of the Capitol,
I didn't see the Capitol. I was far away. I saw the Capitol from afar.
I think for me, that is kind of what I would have thought. I've been twice to D.C.
Yeah.
3 times, a few times. Surprisingly, one of my favorite cities to visit.
Yeah.
I went twice in high school, once for a class trip and once for what's called NYLC, the National Young Leaders Conference. I think it might have even been in the same year. And I loved it. I got to spend actual time with Christopher Dodd.
You could have been a congressman, man.
Dude, that was what I was in Connecticut. Like, that was a real, they pushed me towards that stuff. That's what National Young Leaders Conference was. We did like mock presidential drills, like where one of us was a president and the rest of us were delegates, and we had a situation we had to solve, like that kind of shit. Did
you make any friends that are now in Congress in some way or into politics in DC?
No. I only remember meeting like 2 or 3 people.
Like they all disappeared.
Yeah. But it's I love it. I love the museums. I love seeing the Capitol, the Supreme Court, the White House. So why'd the North win? Why did the South lose?
Well, listen, I think, in all honesty, this is going to sound like bullshit, but honestly, the North had more spirit. They had more to fight for. Their head was in the game. They really focused. They knew what was at stake. Yeah, I think they had. I think it's, eventually, if you rebel against the U.S. at that point.
You sound like such a patriot.
It's the villains versus the heroes, Eddie. And guess what? Life's a movie.
Good always wins.
Movies used to be based on real life.
Oh my God.
But before that, life were based on movies.
You're so close. You're right.
I feel not close.
It has everything to do with heart.
Okay.
It was a heart win.
It is a heart. It's a hearty win.
It kind of comes down to 2 things. It comes down to resources and a couple of like well-placed wins in battles in a very oversimplified way. So the Union consisted of 22 million people, and the Confederacy, the South. So the North had 22 million people. The South had 9 million people. And 3.5 million of those 9 million were slaves. So there's way more people in the North.
Yeah.
When it came, the North also made 90% of all goods produced at that time. So if you wanted anything, it had to come from the North. The North had everything. They had 20,000 miles of train track, which was the only way to get around, like in a mass way.
Right.
It opened up so much train travel. So they had 20,000 miles. The Confederate had only 10,000 miles of track. So they couldn't travel as efficiently. Wow. Like, everything was set up for them to obliterate the South. Except the South had better generals. So their strategy was so much better. Like they were winning battles. They took an early lead in the war, so to speak. The Union, they lost a lot of battles in the first 2 years because of that poor strategy. It had everything to do with being outmaneuvered.
Yeah. What
changed was there's just a few battles that they won. General Grant took Vicksburg, Mississippi. They had control of the lower Mississippi. No, they already had control in New Orleans, and that gave them control of the lower part of the Mississippi River, that was their other travel. And then they had that.
Yeah.
So they took the river. I wrote, do you remember when the Mississippi River mattered? Did you ever hear the phrase like best chili west of the Mississippi?
Oh yeah.
Like, you remember when
right.
Spelling Mississippi mattered? Like when you were in grade school, in elementary school, like, oh my God, yeah, everything west of the Mississippi, or this is the best pie east of the Mississippi. That was like a common phrase.
Was it like back before we could like fly? So that it was like when you came up against the Mississippi River, you're like, well, I guess I gotta turn around. I guess I'm not going west. It's too big. There's a giant water thing blocking me from my manifest destiny. I used to live near the Mississippi River. It was really the I would say I'd pass over the Mississippi River. Mississippi River, like
spell Mississippi.
Mississippi. I remember that because that actually did matter in elementary school.
It did matter. Why did that matter? Why did it matter if I could spell that?
I don't know, but we all knew how to spell it. I don't know why. I think it's because, and here's how I knew everyone knew it. Because the joke that people would all the kids would fucking tell, I remember it so vividly. Because I hear it from every single fucking kid, was like, how do you spell Mississippi? I don't know how. And they're like, Mississippi. And I'd be like, great. And they'd be like, wonder where the P is? And I'm like, yeah, where's the P? Like, right down your leg, idiot. Which is like, all the kids are like, oh man, he got you. Because we all know it's 2 P's in Mississippi. I can't spell anything else. I'm 5. Can barely spell Tennessee. Spell Tennessee.
Tennee. See.
You missed an S.
Damn it. I was really guessing about that second S. I saw it in my head and I was like, you're an idiot.
No, it's real simple. If they have 2 of one thing, they're going to have a couple more 2s in that name. Because back in the South, they're like, I don't know, it sounds good. It's easy to spell.
So Battle of Gettysburg also shifts the tide. It was an important win, and that speech galvanized the troops as well. And then in August of 1864, General Sherman took Atlanta, which was more a political victory.
For politics.
Lincoln had to run. Do you know Lincoln had to run for re-election in the middle of the war, and it looked like he might lose because it was not going well.
Yeah, but you got less U.S. citizens, so I feel like you'd be...
Most of them were in the North, too.
Yeah.
Like, did Lincoln free the slaves? Because that's the big discussion.
Did Lincoln free the slaves?
Yeah.
Well, it's the 13th Amendment that ended the slaves.
Look up the 13th Amendment.
I think he had a part in it, and then it was the, I believe, was it the House? I know very little about the thing I grew up around.
Mm-hmm.
13th Amendment, though, they just had a documentary about it.
I haven't watched that yet.
It was very good. It was about how it's like, in the 13th Amendment, it's like, if you break the law, you can be a slave. It's called jail.
It's a modern form of slavery. The prison system it's not working the way it needs to work.
Well, I forgot if it's what state it is, but in one state they just got the rights to vote. People in jail.
Florida.
Yeah. Wow, that's big for Florida.
Yeah.
Don't hear Florida get a lot of wins.
So the Emancipation Proclamation was made on January 1st, 1863, and it freed all the slaves in the rebelling territories. So it didn't actually free slaves in the border states, which were the states under federal control. So it's this weird double catch where he freed them, but not in the territories he had control over, only in the ones he didn't, and they weren't just going to do that. They weren't just going to let him go.
Yeah.
So then slaves started freeing themselves and joining the army, but the slaves freed themselves, joined the army. Something about Abe because it was against federal law. It forced Abe's hand. He had to free all of them. It forced Abe's hand because he had to free everybody, because the rebelling slaves technically were property under federal law. Oh, yeah, right? It was against federal law to have those freed slaves be in the army. So he had to. He had to end slavery for everything because it needed to be. It couldn't be a federal law that you could have. Slavery needed to be against the law because he couldn't break federal law and have freed slaves.
And that's how the Civil War started?
No, that happened during the Civil War.
Whoa.
What was happening was slaves were freeing themselves and running up north and joining the army. So he had to end slavery because otherwise he was breaking federal law by having these rebelling slaves in his army.
Right. Wow. So he was trying to go through a loophole so he could win the Civil War.
There were over 180,000 former slaves and free black men in the Union Army. That was, they recruited, again, I have it here. They had 2 million soldiers enlisted for the Union and only 900,000 soldiers listed for the Confederate Army. And out of those 2 million Union soldiers, 180,000 of them were former slaves and free black men who fought for the Union. And that's why Abe had to make it.
That's like 10% of the Union Army.
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't even look that up. I'm not looking at it right now.
That would be like if 250,000 people died when you got to town.
Oh my God. Yeah, if human beings are just tallies.
I mean, the Civil War ended up uniting the nation. I know that we still go through struggles of being united, but it actually brought the whole thing together under federal law that everyone was free and together.
Yeah.
And it...
Every once in a while, something happens and it brings America... It feels like it's like if America were like the characters of like a kid's movie where like, this town hated each other and then this person brought it together.
Yeah.
I remember a lot of those stories as kids. Movies as kids. Where am I?
It really does ring true to me that the toughest of times in human history yield the greatest results. It's only when we face a really tough time we come out of it and say, we want it to be better than that. Mm-hmm. That we're better than that. We want to do better than that. Like, that's what ending slavery during the Civil War was about. We want to do better than what we're doing. We want to come together and move forward, but you have to face this really tough time. And it's because of those tough times that we're born into those periods of growth. Mm-hmm. And there are really tough things that happen that galvanize us, that bring us together by force, because it is a jarring experience. This experience of going through the Civil War was very jarring, but it did make one nation. Uh-huh. Before that it was split, and they had the Confederate and they had the Union. This was like, no, we're all together. I mean, it expanded the nation. There was massive amounts of railroad built because of the Civil War to fight the Civil War. So now the nation literally boomed. The other terrible thing to look at, part of human history is that war yields growth. Mm-hmm. Because war on a whole comes from technology. If you sort of looked at it in reverse, it's one tribe overtaking another tribe for their resources. Uh-huh. And war just scales out from that in a certain way. So there's a human conflict that's sort of natural because we're all trying to survive. And if we see a weaker territory or a weaker tribe or a weaker group that we think we can overtake to get their resources, that goes back in history. That's not something we invented with bombs. That was, and finding a way to express that in a good way is important because war is not good. Killing is not good. But it also does yield incredible growth because it forces technology and it's built off the technology and it expands you ultimately. Mm-hmm. And it's a tough balance as humans to recognize that there's a primal aggression to overtake, to gain resources. And then when we enact war, it bolsters technology, right? Because technology is everything from throwing a rock to hitting with a hammer to the internet. Uh-huh. And it forces us to grow. Like we get forced to grow through those things because we're reacting to tough situations. The Civil War being one of the toughest. And we can and it's always like, I have friends that are super competitive. I'm like, that's primitive. That's like, that's like the need to like be in a battle or like become like be like monkeys. We're all derived from monkeys. Yeah. So we're always like, it's my banana. Yes. We're always freaking out at each other. You know, you see people like just driving. People get stressed out and scream at each other. I've seen grown adult human people screaming at each other like a fucking animal. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I've wanted to do that. Yeah. Sometimes I'll be in a car and I'll just start screaming. I'm like, that's a monkey, like in a tire screaming. That's me. We're all just evolved versions because we use technology. We're like using technology, so we're obviously evolved, but we still can't help but leak it out whenever we're like playing fucking tennis or something. We have aggression issues for a lot of reasons. I think for me, it feels like we don't think we have enough space. Like it feels like everyone feels like they're a little too close to each other, which might be bolstered by some of the technology that we're experiencing now. Right now, you think people feel overcrowded? I think so a little bit. I think there's a feeling of that, but it's also bolstered by the technology we're using because we have a new tool. Right? The way I think of the internet is it's a tool like a hammer was a tool. Like the first time they got a hammer, I imagine a caveman had a hammer and he just started fucking hitting everything. Yeah. It wasn't until someone found out that if you invented a nail and used the nail, all of a sudden the technology of a hammer is worth even more. And now it's not true purpose, but its greatest realization can happen. Yeah. And once that hammer can hammer a nail, I don't know what the internet's nail is. Maybe the internet is the nail and the computers were the technology, but it doesn't. Well, I don't know, because if you make the nail another metaphor, if you make it less of like a physical object and more of like something you can use, like getting something simple, like getting someone's medical record to them, or being able to obtain knowledge super quick. It's almost like the nail is us, like we're growing, we're doing something useful with the internet, helping us hammer us down into this finding this knowledge and being able to save lives in some cases by using the internet. There is so much good that comes from the connections that we're able to make quickly and easily. How come we feel like there's so many times it makes it worse? Well, because it's easy to look at the bad. What do you think the worst thing the internet's done? I think besides influence the election. Besides influencing the election. Before this, though, I think it was mostly like the bullying, online bullying. But there was a lot more useful things you could get out of like being connected to a person, feeling like you're not alone. Whenever I feel alone, you can hop on your fucking little cell phone, go on like Instagram and watch someone live Instagramming. You can talk to them if you want. You can FaceTime. You can end loneliness in a second. Is there a chance that is a false connection, and so you're not actually satiating the real connection? Whereas, for instance, before that, we would just get up and go out and go see those people. Yeah, I think that we're less. I think we have the ability to connect more, but we're less connected as people right now. Well, what do you look forward to in a connection? Do you look being in person? You got to be in person, dude. In person is so much different than internet. I think you can still, but some people look at connections as endorphins they get from just having a conversation or laughing with somebody. Being on the phone had more of a connection than most people could feel from reading a letter. We don't talk on the phone as often as we used to.
Yeah, you're right. Because people view connections differently now, I think. They value more of either it's like FaceTime or texting.
Look, I always think to myself, throw yourself into the progress. And if the progress is moving towards this online connection, then that's the way it's going. Maybe it's because we're in the middle of the transition that it feels awkward, but it feels like we're having those issues of connection as people. Like we're not having, I think the more face-to-face like interactions you have, the more you recognize that most people are the same.
Yeah.
And all of these feelings of left versus right or right versus wrong or we're all separated go away when you look someone in the eye.
I feel like I have a platform for everyone. Like for, not necessarily a platform. There are ways I can still be connected with people who I went to high school with that are very different than who I see, like once a week.
Mm-hmm.
So people I see once a week, I don't call them. Sometimes I'll Facebook comment or something like that, and I'll like their Instagrams.
Mm-hmm.
For the most part, we're texting. For my parents, it's phone calls.
I'm also
Everyone
not
has
one.
like
I think texting is underrated in the sense of John Adams just wrote his wife a letter, and then they would wait a few weeks and get a letter, and then they'd wait a few weeks and get a letter. Like that was communication in a primitive sense.
Yeah.
Now we've just updated the delivery time so the messages are shorter because you can actually respond back and forth in real time. That I think is a little bit more valid because you are having an interaction.
We did a sketch with the Burbs where it was all in the Old West, and Savannah's supposed to deliver a letter for Melinda, who's communicating to me, and she writes like this long love letter and shows her like writing it for a while. She gives it to Savannah. She has to endure attacks from other people, to wolves, to like harsh winds, and we're all like doing crazy stuff. She gets to me. I look at it. I read it. I write one of my own. I give it back to her. She does the same thing. It's even worse this time. She goes through like wolves and like all these things. She gets to Melinda. Melinda opens it. It just says K. And it shows how like simple, like how much we take for granted, like just texting.
Yeah.
Or we'll just be like, letter. Here's literally one letter.
Out of the Civil War came a national currency. That's when we finally established a national currency. Abe Lincoln signed in the IRS, unfortunately. He started the
Keeping
IRS.
us honest.
So here's what happened. This I found was an interesting concept. I learned this on Crash Course on YouTube.
I love Crash Course.
The Civil War cost $6.7 billion.
Whoa, we could have built like 7 walls. Actually, I don't know how much the wall's supposed to be.
Let's not talk about that. Let's talk about the Civil War. $6.7 billion. If the government had instead purchased every slave, freed them, and given them 40 acres, it would have cost them $3.1 billion.
Wait, how much? 3?
Yeah, less than half the actual cost of the war.
Man.
That's a weird. I mean, that's not how. It's not an actual option that could have occurred. It's not like somebody could have actually said, "Hey, here's a plan to end slavery. We buy them all." That would be a terrible end to the war. Just the comparative cost of it is. I don't know why. It just struck me because he said it on that show, and I was like, "Oh, that's a weird fact. Like that's a weird way to put it."
Mm-hmm.
But the war was this inevitable clash based on what was happening. I don't have what the beginning of the Civil War was. What was the beginning of the Civil War?
Bloodiest 4 years of American history. Wow, this looks like a long read.
It was bad.
By 1860, majority of slave states were threatening secession. So it had been going on for a little while. I think in, let's see, 1858 is when kind of there was like some tension between the North and the South on the subject of slavery. Here's the thing.
When did it start? When did it start? What started it?
Look, I'm reading, man. I'm doing the best I can under said conditions.
This wasn't an easy
This is a lot.
search.
I'm looking at 5 paragraphs right now. Nothing is short in this fucking war.
Not even the men's beards.
South Carolina set about seizing forts and arsenal. So they're like, oh, you want to fight? You want to fight? They're like gathering their shit. And then, so southern states, within 6 weeks, 5 other southern states along South Carolina were Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, and Louisiana. They all followed South Carolina. And then eventually it was like Texas and all the other states. I don't know. Listen, man, this is I'm reading fast.
Okay, let's make.
There's no answer to this question
for next month.
It goes right into death.
For next month's study guide, let's study first.
No. I would rather make the listener very frustrated. Dude, can I tell you something? In school, I remember this. In school, people were saying, like, students were saying, whenever the teacher would say a fact, like slavery was the cause of, like, was the reason the Civil War was fought to end slavery. And there were some other students who were like, my daddy said it was the economy. Or, you know.
Is there an alternate theory? Look, I know.
No, they said that because
there's a lot of factors that go into it, but it comes down to that issue.
Yeah, people would say the economy because it's a candy-coated way of saying slavery.
Yeah. People
in the South are so sensitive. Not everyone in the South, but there are a lot of people in the South who are still sensitive about that. And it's like, you didn't, like, they were the bad guys.
You excited for Wednesday night?
Why was happening Wednesday night?
I'm going to bed early.
Oh, that's not good. We have a show that night.
This has been Historical Roast.
Teaching history.
A lesson.